with Islam Makhachev moving up to welterweight and absolutely dominating JDM, I think it's time to match up Islam Makhachev with the rest of the welterweights and see how he stacks up. Starting with Shavkat Rakhmonov, one of the most hyped up contenders right now at welterweight. He's been out for about a year. He's undefeated, but how does Islam Makhachev perform against him? I'm just going to say it right now. I think Islam Makhachev beats him. I think a lot of people after that fight against JDM are thinking the same thing. But what Shavkat does have is a unique challenge for Islam Makhachev. Shavkat Rakhmonov may be the biggest welterweight in the UFC. He has a granite chin. He has great power. On the feet, it would be interesting to see how that plays out. How does Islam Makhachev do against a rangier striker? The problem is, I think this fight is going to end the same way as JDM. I think Islam Makhachev could do even worse to Shavkat Rakhmonov because the truth is, Shavkat just does not have great wrestling. Not as great as Islam Makhachev. It's really solid. He can, out wrestle some strikers like Wonder Boy. But against even an opponent like Ian Garry, he was having trouble on the ground. He was almost getting rear naked choked by Ian Garry. And Ian Garry has a great ground game. I think it's highly underrated. But that being said, I think in the Islam Makhachev match, that would be the biggest problem. And I just don't see Shavkat being able to get up. And I think it would be a submission loss. I think Islam Makhachev would submit Shavkat Rakhmonov, or at the very least have a 5-round domination, similar to the way he dominated JDM. Now, what about Kamaru Usman? This guy's been talking a lot, and honestly, I hope he doesn't get the title shot. This guy came off of a win, a singular win against Joaquin Buckley in a very lackluster performance. He did better than expected, but that doesn't mean the performance was that good. On the feet, he looked absolutely horrible. On the ground, he proved that he could still control people, but that's what makes this Islam Makhachev match kind of interesting. Usman will probably be able to keep himself on the feet or be able to get Islam Makhachev off of him better than any other welterweight in the division. If Usman on short notice can move up a weight class against Khamzat Chimaev, who is arguably even more dominant on the ground than Islam, and at the very least, he's a bigger version of Islam almost, and Usman was able to survive on the ground, I think Usman would be able to keep it standing. The problem is, on the feet, I think Islam Makhachev's going to pick Usman apart. If that fight happens, I think it's going to be a kickboxing match. It's going to be like a Colby versus Usman where they're both grapplers and they refuse to grapple. And on the feet, Islam Makhachev even proved it against JDM. I know there was a huge threat of the takedown and JDM was kind of exhausted, but the point is, even early in the fight, he was hammering low kicks. Against Kamaru Usman, I think there's a big weakness in the low kick. I think Makhachev would be able to beat Usman pretty comfortably just on the feet. And in the grappling, I would favor Islam Makhachev. I don't see a way where Usman can win that fight because Usman does not have a very possible finishing threat as some of these other welterweights coming up the ranks have. What about Ian Garry though? This fight, I think, is the closest matchup. I think these two styles are very interesting. A lot of people, overrate Ian Garry, but let's look at Ian Garry's last performance against Prates. He outstruck Prates and dominated him pretty much over 5 rounds. I know in the 5th round he got rocked, but other than that, he put on a clinic, and that win has aged like wine. What happened with Carlos Prates just last night? He knocked out Leon Edwards. What does that tell you about Ian Garry, okay? That tells you that Ian Garry on the feet is a problem, and especially with the ranginess Ian Garry has, that may be a problem for Islam Makhachev. I think Islam does struggle with a rangier fighter. I think the low kick is going to be a lot harder to land on a guy like Ian Garry, and I think Gary's just boxing, kickboxing in general, is more high level than Makhachev. But let's talk about the grappling, because that's obviously the game plan for Islam Makhachev against any one of these 170 pounders. And to be honest, I think Ian Garry next to Kamaru Usman and maybe Belal has the best chance of staying up on the feet against Islam. I think even if he's on the bottom, Ian Garry is going to put up a lot more of a fight than a guy like JDM. Ian Garry's still young and he's constantly improving on the ground. Honestly, even on the feet as well. I think every single fight Ian Garry's in, he's getting better. And I think if this fight took place, Ian Garry has the best chance out of any other welterweight to beat Islam Makhachev. Do I think he's going to win that? I'm not picking him to win. I think Ian Garry will beat Belal Muhammad in their fight next week. And maybe he gets the title shot off that. If the title shot happens, I'm going to predict Islam Makhachev, but I think it would be a lot more of a battle than a lot of people think. I think I would do 60-40 in Islam Makhachev's favor going into that matchup. And I think what makes that so interesting is Ian Garry is such an elite striker on the feet. He has knockout power. He's big. He's one of the tallest, lankiest welterweights in the division, but his jiu-jitsu is really good. His wrestling, maybe not as good as his jiu-jitsu, but there's a possibility he can put some of a fight up against Islam Makhachev on the ground. Now for Islam Makhachev versus Carlos Prates. Carlos Prates just knocked out Leon Edwards. Amazing finish. I would not be surprised if he gets a title shot just off that performance. And on the feet, I think we all know that if this was just a striking battle, Prates would put Islam Makhachev in the shadow realm. He would probably finish him in the second round, first round. Problem is, of course, is Islam Makhachev's grappling, and that's the big issue with this fight. Prates, I think, has no chance on the ground against Islam. I don't trust him to stuff takedowns, and as tall as he is, he doesn't seem as big of a welterweight as some of these other guys. I don't think he's cutting as much weight as really anybody in the top ranks as a welterweight, and I think that's only going to make it more difficult for him, and I think Carlos Prates might have the worst chance of beating Makhachev out of anybody at welterweight. But another fighter on that card was Michael Morales. He got a finish over Sean Brady, which, to be honest, I was picking Sean Brady. I thought it was a 50-50 fight. I genuinely didn't know who to pick. I went with Brady because of the grappling. The problem was Brady didn't use a single fucking ounce of grappling in this fight. He was maybe half the size of Michael Morales at best. He had absolutely no range advantage, and he stood on the outside and tried to have a striking battle with the knockout artist striker Michael Morales. I don't know what he was doing. He got embarrassed out there, and an insanely impressive performance for Morales. I mean, the guy's 25 years old, and he just beat the number 2 ranked guy based off of, merit. He probably deserves it. He just finished the second ranked guy in round 1. And the interesting thing about Michael Morales is, to me, he's kind of a question mark. I've seen some of his fights, but it's hard to know exactly where he is at the grappling. I don't know how he would do against an Islam Makhachev takedown. I don't know where his skill level is. But what I do know is that he has insane physicality. He might be stronger than anybody else in this division. And I think that alone gives him a big edge on Makhachev. I think he's probably more physical than Makhachev. Maybe not in grappling and squeezing and pulling, but power-wise, just weight and size-wise, he definitely has that. And in the striking, I think there's a chance Makhachev, picks him apart with the kickboxing or leg kicks, but there's a lot more danger from Michael Morales' power than maybe JDM's power. But at the end of the day, I don't know if Michael Morales is ready yet for a guy as high level on the ground as Islam Makhachev. So I think Makhachev would take that one home. And lastly, for Belal, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one. They're both grapplers. They can both wrestle, but Makhachev, he clearly is on another level. I think he's stronger. He's bigger than Belal. I don't see a world where Belal wins that. I truly don't. He's not better on the feet. Maybe he has better cardio, but that isn't going to be a factor when you have a guy as skilled as Makhachev and as physical. I think he's going to be held down, and I think he may get choked, or he'll just get done similar to how JDM does. I think that fight's a pretty easy fight to predict, and I don't think that fight will ever happen. Maybe if Belal gets the win against Garry, that fight could be made, but otherwise I just don't see it happening. And with that dominant win over JDM that Islam Makhachev had, I really don't see any welterweight right now beating Islam Makhachev. I don't know if anybody does. I think the closest fight is Garry. Let me know what you guys think about that. If you guys like the video, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one.